From Columbia University, the Gray Matter CU podcast is a show about the goings-on of neuroscience professors on campus and the motivations and explanations behind their research. I'm Rebecca Ye, co-editor-in-chief of Gray Matter CU, and on the show today, Lila Baer talks with Dr. Alfredo Spagna to discuss his journey in attention research. Welcome. I am here with Professor Spagna. I want to say thank you again for coming and speaking with us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. My name is Alfredo Spagna. I'm a faculty of the psychology department at Columbia University. And in particular, I'm a lecturer in discipline and the director of neuroscience and behavior major. And I'm very happy to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Okay, so my first question for you is, how did you get here? I know that you started with a degree from the University of Rome. So, right. Yeah, you've come a long way.
Yes, it's about 8 hours flight, but not that simple as a flight. So, how did I get here? Well, I studied in Italy. I'm from a small town in the southern Italy, which is called Reggio Calabria, and that's where I did, all my high school. And then the closest place back then, the closest place to study psychology was actually Rome, which is the capital of Italy. So that's where I got my bachelor and master's degree. And then the way PhD programs work in Europe is slightly different than in the US. So you have to do a master to access a PhD program, while here is more like the master is inside the PhD. So once you are inside a grad program in Italy and in the European Union in general, you have only 3 years rather than 5 or 6 like here. And half of that time you can spend it abroad, visiting other laboratories. So that's how I got to Mount Sinai Hospital, where I did my kind of international part of the program, and working with Dr. Jim Fan in a big neuroimaging laboratory of neuroimaging of attention. And then I just stayed longer doing a postdoctoral study with him, and then I was in the US.
So speaking of your work, I know that you still study attention now. Can you tell me a little bit about like why you think attention is so interesting?
That's a great question. And I can also tell you maybe a little bit about why I think that attention is not interesting anymore. Yeah. So why is attention interesting? Well, I bumped into attention studies just, when I was doing my bachelor's thesis. I just joined this laboratory because there was somehow an opening, and I was in my junior year saying, hey, let me explore. I really understood back then that attention is such a fundamental function, as we perform attentional tasks in our daily life without being aware of it, somehow even more fundamental than language. It kind of takes some effort to speak, right? Or to learn something, or to make some mathematical operation and to memorize something. But attention is something that it's always on and we barely recognize it. And that's what attracted me a lot. And computerized tasks, very simple experiments conducted in the laboratory to try to dissect what attention is, and how healthy individuals, or let's say healthy ways of using attention, are implemented in our daily life on a daily basis, and also unhealthy or pathological attentional ways of paying attention to things. Actually, attention is something that helps us cope with our everyday's life, right? Meaning that you pay attention to something, therefore you need to perceive something to pay attention to it. Or you pay attention to your memory, you pay attention to your imagination, and so on.
I'm just thinking about in class when I can't pay attention, there are certain things that we are always like, the switch is always on. So can you talk a little bit about the difference in types of attention and like intentional attention?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest theories of attention divides it into three different components. One system is it's called the alertness system, and it means your ability to maintain a state of readiness over time, right? What a person does in classroom is you have to stay alert, which is why the term alertness, for 75 minutes constantly, right? And
right.
Taking notes and listening while taking notes and listening, and this avoiding the information from your colleague that is doing something else on your side and so on. So the first thing is being alert. But there are also other two functions which are called, one is the orienting of attention. So as you stay alert, you want to enhance the processing of one area or one feature of your environment, for example, the teacher's voice or the slides on the screen, and inhibit the effect of distracting information, like the ambulance noise that we hear all the time at Columbia in the classroom, or again, somebody typing next to you. So you want to orient your attention towards an area of the visual field or a specific frequency of your auditory or the sounds you're listening. And the third system is called the executive control system, the executive control function, that are more about sequencing behavior and performing and avoiding conflicting information at whatever you are perceiving. In other terms, Stroop test, right? When I ask you to read, to name the color of the ink in which a word is written and avoid the interference produced by the meaning of that same word. For example, the word red written in blue is very difficult to say blue because you are kind of attracted to the term red. Then that's when you're using your executive control functions, inhibiting a response that is preponderant, that is very strong, to give rise to more complex behavior. So it's important to remember that then they all work together to produce what attention is. So somehow you split, but then you get to go back and say, this is how I use attention. So yeah, in the classroom, you got to do all these things at the same time. Why is it difficult? Because attention is resource consuming, right? So you're using these brain regions, and sustaining activation for 75 minutes is very resource consuming, and it takes also a lot of training.
Speaking of training and taking a lot of resources, some people are better at being able to concentrate when there are distractions around. Some people can study in coffee shops, and then some people need to be on the 6th floor of Butler. Does that have to do with training and how you were brought up, or is that natural ability?
I think that is absolutely about training. Like anything in nature, we can describe it as a normal distribution, meaning if you look at the population level, there are people that are more 3 or more standard deviation, that right. They can only do Butler and they can only do coffee shops. But there is also kind of a lot of people that is more in between, and depending on your mood, right? You may be, today I'm so stressed, I just don't want to see anybody, I have to study this chapter, let me go to Butler. Or today, I kind of want to, take it easier, so let me go to the coffee shop so I have more distraction and so on. So there is a lot of training, there are a lot of variables that affect the way we pay attention to things. It's definitely something that we get trained on, the way you learn how to pay attention to things, or the ways we are trained, we develop our, attentional skills affect what we are better at doing and what we prefer to do, or the ways we are paying attention or not. But you can see this as like a marathon. If you think about 75 minutes, we don't do 75 minutes of nothing continuously, right? So right. A classroom is usually 75 minutes or even 1 hour and 50 minutes. But that's a marathon thing. It takes training. It takes a lot of time to pay attention in class, for example. And similarly, you can train to be somehow more or less affected from distraction, even if you're a Butler 6th floor kind of person.
Right. Okay. So now thinking about when I do get distracted and the attention kind of
goes all over the place, then you start imagining things. I know that you do research on the imagination. So can you transition a little bit to that and tell me about what's happening when we're imagining things?
Absolutely. So if you think about what imagination is somehow the opposite of perceiving something. So it's creating an object in your mind in absence of that object, of that physical object. So if I'm thinking about a red apple, I can either think about it because I have it in front of me, or I can come up with it. So I'm very curious to see what happens in the brain when we do that process, right? What happens? How is it possible that we do that? And going back to the attentional field also, what is attention doing in that specific? What is the contribution that attentional functions have? Or what is the function that attention implements in this case? Why? Because, well, I know that if I'm not paying attention, or at least this is my approach to this, if I'm not paying attention to something, I'm not going to perceive it, right? Mm-hmm. If I don't pay attention to what you are telling me right now, I'm very likely going to miss the meaning of what you're trying to ask me, right? I may pick up some bits and pieces, but the meaning is not there. So this is true for perception. So the question is it true also for imagination? Can I imagine something without paying attention to it? Is that an option, right? Maybe not really. To imagine something, I have to, you have to tell me, okay, Alfredo, now imagine an elephant, and I'm going to be, okay, elephant, and I have to voluntarily use my attention to focus and think about an elephant and come up with a realistic visual image of that elephant. And to me, it feels very different than visual perception, even though the two biggest theories about visual imagery, they keep pointing at the overlap between imagery and perception, both in terms of processes, meaning of mechanisms, of cognitive mechanisms implemented to imagine or perceive something, but also in terms of neural structure, so which are the brain regions that are activated in perception and imagery. But I there is enough evidence to say that that's not true, but also I don't feel like it, right? I don't feel that when I'm perceiving something, I have to do similar things than when I'm imagining something. It's subjectively very different, and subjective reports are limited, but also, this is psychology, so we have to trust a little bit the subjective reports, otherwise we're going to miss some of the question, right?
Right. So when you imagine something, does it take effort in the brain, like active energy, and is it the same amount if you were in class and either you could be paying attention or you could be imagining something? Is that the same effort you're putting into either direction?
When you pay attention to things, actually, one of the first things, it seems, of course, always we don't know a lot about the brain, but it seems like one of the first things that you have to do is use the prefrontal cortex, right? So activate an volitional area of control to say, they are asking me to judge if the clock hands at 6 p.m. or at 4 p.m., which of these two clock hands are forming a bigger angle? 6 p.m., 4 p.m. So I'm thinking, I'm forcefully, kind of effortfully trying to come up with a representation of 6 p.m. and the two hands are kind of vertical, and 4 p.m. the angle is smaller, to come up with this representation, right? So it's very thoughtful, but if you put in front of me 6 p.m. and 4 p.m., it really needs a lot of frontal cortex activation to imagine something. But to go back and to your question a little bit more and say, I think that you're drawing a very interesting parallel, which is an open-ended question or open question right now, which is, so is exogenous involuntary imagery possible? Because when I'm mind wandering, so when I'm in class and my your instructor's voice becomes boring or you're tired, so you start mind wandering, then you're kind of imagining things more effortlessly or more involuntarily, which goes against a little bit the claim that I did before, which is you cannot imagine things in an exogenous way, in a completely exogenous way.
Wait, can I interrupt? Can you define exogenous, please?
Sure. So the exogenous means, again, involuntary, automatically, right? Exogenous, a memory, a stimulus that shows up in your visual field is something exogenous, versus endogenous is something that comes from within you. It's something, endo from Latin means from inside. So, and about all of this, what I'm trying to say is that we don't have a clear understanding of when mental imagery turns out to be an exogenous process, meaning we don't have a clear understanding of which are the conditions in which imagery just shows up in our mind. It seems to be a very much endogenous process, even though we can observe that sometimes you just mind wander and supports the rise of all these thoughts and, your groceries, right? Or is my bike parked, and all of that, which is a form of image, which definitely comes with some sort of visual literary representation of it.
So, based off of your work with attention, do you have any advice for students to better pay attention to things that they should be paying attention to?
For sure. The first thing is, I'm going to sound like my grandma, but she was right, I can tell you after many years, which is sleep well, because attention and sleep are kind of one and the same. I told you about the alertness system, right? The vigilant system is the same vigilant system that you use for sleeping, right? That you shut down when you're sleeping. So make sure that you take care of your sleep, which is something that students usually don't pay attention that much to, or they think that pulling on overnight is going to help them. That's never very often not the case. So it's about sleep. It's about oxygenation. So do sports, meaning the more you keep your body oxygenated, the more you are able to oxygenate, the better, because that's what the brain uses, a lot of oxygen. What else the brain uses is glucose. So make sure that you are well fed. And again, it looks like my grandma, and now I'm going to tell you, wear a t-shirt under your shirt or a sweater, and that's it. And the next thing is try not to cram things. The secret of a successful career, I think, is in learning who you are, what works best for you, and programming your daily activities in a way that works better for you. It's a lot of scheduling. It's a lot of lists. It's a lot of, I'm going to do this on Monday. I'm going to go to sleep at 10 p.m. every night, no matter what. And I have to finish before that. If you do this, your body enters into this cycle, which is again about sleeping as well. Also, some hormonal response kicks in at that entrained kind of rhythm, and you will see that you will be training your system to respond at those time, which is like 7 a.m. wake up, 7:30 I have my first class, and so on. It really helps a lot.
I feel like I kind of just figured that out, and when you're younger, you kind of have that forced onto you because you have to wake up at this time for school, and then you come home and like you eat at a certain time. And so everything is super regulated, and then you kind of figure out later again in college, or maybe you don't, maybe you do, that like that actually is a really strong tool to make you be a really functional human.
There was a reason why when you were 4 and you couldn't decide, society made that decision for you, right?
Right.
That you had to go at school 7:45 and you stay there till. Now, when you move on to university, college years, you have to decide it.
And just one more thing. Also, I kind of like how you use the word train, because you can still change and you can still enforce strong habits. And training just is kind of a cool word because it kind of implies improvement, in my opinion. So
sure. And it puts the control is in your hand.
Right.
The control
exactly.
is really on your hand. And you can do a lot, up to almost anything. It's really just find your key to get there.
Right. So, okay, let's end on a few rapid fire questions. Just say whatever comes to mind. So we're going to start with this or that. So city or beach?
Beach.
Cats.
The sun need the beach.
Fair. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Okay. I'm a cat person, but we'll let that slide. Pizza or pasta?
Ooh, pizza or pasta? No. I'm going to take my passport away. I'm not gonna answer that question.
Okay, fair. Okay, and my final question for you for the day is, what is your Halloween costume, since it is Halloween weekend?
Ooh, I don't know. I think I'm going to be a regular ghost.
A ghost? Yeah. Okay.
What is your Halloween costume?
I actually don't have a Halloween costume yet.
Come on.
I know. I couldn't have. I actually shouldn't have even asked that question if I didn't have anything planned. But I'm gonna work on it. Yeah. Well, anyway, thank you so much. I thought this was really great and interesting, and I am so glad that you agreed to work with us and talk to me today.
Thanks so much for listening to the show this week. If you want to request a neuroscience professor to hear from, you can do so at our website, graymattersjournalcu.org. If you want to follow the show on social media, our Instagram is @graymatterscu. This episode was produced and edited by Lila Baer. Research was done by Melody Fang and Anna Sofia Rico Rosso. Our production staff also includes Sam Hutchinson, Mariana Mosen, and Chloe Wong. Our executive producer is Lila Baer. I'm Rebecca Ye, and you've been listening to Gray Matters CU podcast.